Dialects. Now we will see how two languages differ from dialects, or what are the characteristics that differentiate a dialect from a language. So a dialect has been defined as a substandard variety of a language. And this is what is more or less the kind of discussion or definition that has been going about when we talk about dialects. So what are we saying? We are saying that a dialect is a variety of language that does not enjoy the equal prestige that a language does. Now, a dialect can be related to social classes. In this, we call it a socio-dialect. That is, the kind of language that upper class people speak is different from the kind of language or the dialect over here that the working class speaks. Similarly, there can be a place dialect, that is, dialect related to ethnicity. So, in that case, we will also see that people belonging to a certain region and speaking the same language might speak different varieties or different dialects of the same language. And in the same way, there is what we call a historical dialect. A historical dialect is a dialect which has been in use in some time span that has passed away. But over time, this kind of dialect is no more in use. For instance, if you think about Urdu literature and you think about English literature and the kind of way or the dialect in which the characters in those literatures speak is not how those characters are made to speak in your more contemporary novels or literatures. In any case, on one thing that we all agree is that dialect is related to kind of social stigma. So a person might be speaking the same language, for instance, comes from a small city, takes admission in a university in Lahore, and if that person speaks Urdu in a certain different way, using a different type of vocabulary, although that person might still be speaking in Urdu, you might hear students saying that he doesn't even know how to speak. That is, the dialect that we speak at times is accompanied by a kind of social stigma related to class and region. If you ask a layman what dialect is, that the person might say that dialect is something what we speak to our family and friends, and the standard language is the one that we use in our universities, colleges, or schools. So in any case, the kind of vocabulary that is chosen in a dialect or which becomes a part of the dialect is considered more substandard. Now, this is interesting. Here are people who say that dialect is the language of the oppressed. So what do we mean regarding this? What we mean is that what we call a language and what we call a dialect of that language is a matter of power. So people who want to keep other people in a state of oppression would call their languaging practices a dialect. And there are instances in which gradually you might come across certain languages or certain dialects that have been from language, they have been turned into dialects, and from being dialects, they have been standardized into languages. So what we are saying is that boundaries between a language and dialect are fluid. Now, in a way to sort of differentiate between language and dialect, some would say that dialects are mutually intelligible. So you can say that these two, A and B, are languages and not dialects. If dialects are, if they are mutually intelligible, And if they are not mutually intelligible, that is, people speaking those languages A and B, if they cannot understand each other, then we say, well, they are speaking a different language. However, if we look at different examples, there seems to be a contradiction in place. For instance, think about Urdu, Hindi, and Punjabi. Now, all three of these languages are more or less mutually intelligible. That is, people speaking either of these languages can actually understand what is being said in the other two languages. Yet, we do not call them dialects of a single variety of language. We call them languages. Similarly, you have people who say that Chinese has different dialects, and you say one language. However, we find that at least 5 different dialects of Chinese are mutually not intelligible. That is, people speaking those dialects will not be able to understand each other. And similarly, there is another case of Mount Kilimanjaro, where people are speaking dialects, what they say, of one language, but they cannot understand each other. So what we are saying is that this difference between language and dialect is socially constituted. We decide what to call a language, and what to call it a dialect. So it's about labeling. In any case, whether we call it a language or a dialect, we need to see that these varieties are not isolated wholes, but they are the result of how languages are used and our own languaging practices.